Peace family, Vie Darling here, the Cosmic Queen, your intergalactic interpreter. And so I just wanted to expound upon a few things that I shared about and talked about today. So in my story on my personal page, I talked about how I predicted in my series that I'm doing, and I knew that I was going to be predicting these sorts of things. That's why the series exists, and I knew that a lot of things like this were going to be happening, so that is why I created this series. But I predicted in this series the earthquake in Syria and Turkey. I didn't particularly want to get too deep into the weeds, and I will also say that I re-recorded the part 2 that I did about Earth, and I can actually share that to my YouTube page, but I redid it because I felt like the quality was just like really bad and I didn't like that. I can share that, but I predicted this earthquake. I predicted things like what's going on with the train derailment that happened, that people are basically referring to as like America's Chernobyl. And I predicted a lot more stuff, but this is not the first time that I predicted those things. I actually predicted those things also in 2020. So I have never actually shared publicly the prophecy that I had in 2020. I've shared different versions of it that I felt were watered down. But so in my story on the Clarity Apothecary page, and it is Clarity Apothecary, and yes, it says Clarity X Apothecary, but it's just called Clarity Apothecary. On my Clarity Apothecary page, I shared in my story, which I'm going to save as a highlight, about the first prophecy. So the first set of notes that I shared are the first prophecy, and I shared that to a small group of people on WhatsApp, people that I felt like would be receptive to the message. And I'm not going to say that like everybody was. I think some of them definitely probably thought that I was like crazy when I shared that message, especially because like I was saying that, you know, 5G was killing the planet and basically was going to be wiped out. But the thing about that is, at that time, people were talking about 𝗧𝗵𝗿𝗲 as being caused by 5G, and that's simply, I don't think that's true. I'm not gonna like get into the weeds about that, but like I don't believe that that's true. But people were thinking that, and that's not at all what I was saying. And I think that it's really actually very clear what I was saying in my message. And if you know what 5G is, it's actually the 5th generation of information technology that we have. We have iPhones and stuff like that now. We have like the Apple Watch and things like that now, but that's 5G. Then this that we're existing in now is 5G, and whatever happens next is going to be 6G. That's the 6th generation. But we also used to have 4G. You know what I mean? And I mean, we used to have razors and Blackberries and things like that. Like, so what I'm talking about is not abstract. I'm actually being very concrete and very clear and concise and using proper terms for things. And I would really invite others to do the same, because we're having completely different conversations if you don't actually know exactly what I'm talking about. So I would really encourage people to actually like look into what I'm talking about and like get the facts. And then I want to just say that I talk about solar flares and how solar flares are going to be causing a lot of destruction to the data and the like mainframe and things like that. Like, I think it's funny that like Y2K is making such a big comeback, because a lot of the people who are like really, I want to say, hyping that up weren't even alive during Y2K and don't even remember Y2K, because they literally could not remember it because they weren't alive. But the thing about Y2K is that actually a lot of people thought that the world was going to end. A lot of people thought that like infrastructures, or rather institutions, were afraid that the infrastructure of our modern world was going to fail, because they weren't sure what was going to happen when we reset from 99 to 00. Nobody had ever experienced anything like this. And actually there were a lot of people and a lot of systems that were kind of out of commission for a while. Some people even didn't go to work for like a while because of Y2K. And that was referred to as like the countdown to chaos. That was referred to as the Y2K problem. Y2K literally means year 2000. So these things are facts. I remember Y2K. I remember where I was when on New Year's that year. I remember pre-Y2K because I remember the 90s. People were really afraid. Like, I even know someone whose mom like hid under a table. Part of that is because they got the calculations wrong. But the point is, it's happened before where solar flares have wiped out like the operating systems of cities. It happened in Canada in the 80s, and we haven't progressed to a place where that's necessarily something that is impossible. And that's because we are operating using a very unsustainable system technologically, because it's not earth integrated. And if it were earth integrated, this wouldn't be something that would be able to happen. And the fact of the matter is, like, people don't understand that data, like where data is stored, where like these mainframes are stored, like, they take up so much space and they take up so much water to keep these things running. It's completely unsustainable and it is killing the planet. Like, literally, this is not something that I made up. This is not some pseudoscience. It's literally causing so much harm to the planet. People talk about like, oh my God, like almond milk is hurting the planet because of how much water it takes for almonds to be farmed. Okay, so the same thing can be said about like where these mainframes, what is it called? I'm blanking on what it's called, but like where these mainframes, basically where they're stored, right? I really can't think of another word for it, but essentially one thing that, and I talk about that, like after I have that first prophecy that I share from 2020, the next set of stories are about a New York Post article that talks about the solar flares. And we're going to be seeing more and more and more solar flares. If you are someone like me, where like pretty much all of the articles that I read online have to do with history, or they have to do in archaeology, or they have to do with space and like physics. I am very much up to date and aware of like all sorts of stuff going on in space, in the space weather. This is something that's actually tracked by NASA. It's tracked by NOAA, the National Oceanic and I think Aerospace Association or Air Association, but NOAA and NOAA, which my sister actually used to work for. These space weather is real. The weather on the sun is real, and it really has effects where like we're entering into the season of space weather and solar weather where the sun is becoming more active. This happens about every 10 years. It goes through this period where it's more active. I think it lasts for 3 years. Don't quote me on that, but it goes through this cycle where it's like less active, and then for a few years it's like super active, and we're in that period right now. So there are more solar storms. There are things happening that like nobody's ever seen the sun do before. Like, I can share an article where the sun just like emitted like a flame that like detached, and seemingly, apparently, and by apparently I mean it appears that it created a vortex on one of the poles of the sun. And if you're not somebody who understands a lot about astronomy, I would just say to learn about it before you try to say that what I'm saying is not real or, or like not possible, you know, whatever. But what is happening is, over the summer last year, the Schumann resonance, which measures the like electromagnetic frequencies of the planet, we were getting blasted so much by solar energy that the Schumann resonance went so high that it blacked out. The frequencies that the planet was experiencing could not even be measured by the Schumann resonance spectrometer. These things are really happening, and it's actually a pretty big deal. The tectonic plates are shifting in the planet. I talk about this in the video very clearly. This is science. Okay, it's scientifically happening. Well, I think it's really important because things like this are going to cause more and more natural disasters. The Yangtze River drying up. The Yangtze River is one of the main 5 rivers that civilization across the globe was founded upon, and it dried up last year. the Amazon rainforest fires, causing such big, like so much smoke that it could be seen from space, like the Australian bushfires causing acid rain in New Zealand, okay? Animals are dying in droves because of this train derailment that happened in the Midwest. The Fukushima reactor made parts of the Pacific Ocean so poisonous that we're really encouraged not to eat fish from that region anymore. So I just want to get on here and say, like, it may seem too big to believe, but you know, fortunately and unfortunately, I don't like being right about these things. But I always am, and I always have been. This next few years, we're gonna see more and more of those things happening, and the infrastructure of this society cannot handle it, and it is going to cause collapse. We're already living in economic collapse, okay? More and more of this stuff is going to happen. If you're seeing like all of these animals are dying, what do you think that is going to do for the famine that we're already in the beginning stages of experiencing? My cousin works at Target, and they are finding it hard to even like buy produce. When I ask them to get produce, like they're all out of produce because there are food shortages that are happening. Okay, like after I put out that video and I said like there's going to be a plague that is spread by meat coming and people should avoid eating meat, especially because like the factory industrial complex is causing there to be famine because we have just destroyed the earth and made it unfertile, and all of these things are unsustainable and it's not going to be able to continue. And somebody immediately sent me something about how 80 butchers had died, which I think is like a Middle Eastern country because of like mishandling of meat. It is called a Congo virus, but it's not from Congo. It's actually from, it's actually happening in, I think, the Middle East or an Asian country. So I then shared after that, and I say this all to say like, I'm really into science. I have been all my life. I'm extremely analytical. I'm extremely well-researched and well-read. I have known how to do college level research since I was in 8th grade. I was in a special program for advanced children where we learned how to do college level research. What I'm saying is like grounded in science. I make sure to research the things that I'm talking about. I've taken 2 astronomy courses at the university level and I got A's in them. So I just want to say that I do talk more about that, and I am tracking it happening in the next part of my story. And after that, I share in my story the second prophecy that I shared with the collective, which was, I call it a watered down version, but I actually think like now actually looking at the first prophecy, I think it's more of a building upon, and it is actually deeper, more contextualized, and deeper, broader, more nuanced, and brings in more references about what's going on, and it's really more so for earth angels. So I'm someone like, if you are a 3D mundane person who's just looking for a horoscope about what your love life is giving in the next few years, I'm not the person for you to be following or watching, unless you want to go on a journey that's going to be life-changing that you can never come back from. But I'm the person who, like, if you are an earth angel, if you are a shaman, if you are a healer, if you are a witch, if you are a dream walker, if you are a priestess, if you are a child of God, if you are all of these different things, an exorcist, this, that, and the third, whatever, I'm the one for you to work with. Because I come from a long lineage on both sides of doing this kind of work. And not for nothing, I'm not playing games. The time for games is over. So I would encourage, I'm just saying, I'm dedicating this space on Clarity Apothecary to this kind of work. I'm dedicating this to being a safe space for this community to cultivate, to come together, to coalesce, and to grow together, so that we can create a network of light all across the planet, and an ecosystem that is sustainable for us, because we are going to be the ones that are left when there's nothing else, right? So with that being said, I appreciate y'all for watching and sticking through this with me, and I hope that I've clarified and said something helpful, and I ask that y'all just, you know, stay tuned and share this kind of information with someone that you think could benefit. There's also a Discord that I'm gonna make in order to cultivate this community on a little bit of a deeper level for the Clarity community, and so folks can find their, you know, find our tribe. So I love you all truly and deeply, and I hope that you have a beautiful rest of whatever time that you're watching this. And as always, happy hunting.